There's a light on the ridge every night. You ever see something that shouldn't be there, but it's just far enough away that you can't be sure it's real? That's what happened to me 2 summers ago. And if you've ever camped alone in the mountains, maybe you'll understand why I can't shake it. It started like one of those soul-cleansing trips people write about online. I'd been working remotely for months. Long hours, blue light headaches, zero connection to the world outside my laptop screen. So I booked a week off and drove south from Ohio into the Appalachian region of North Carolina to a place I found on an old hiking forum. It wasn't even marked on Google Maps, just a string of GPS coordinates dropped in a thread titled "Most Peaceful Spot on Earth." I drove in late. By the time I reached the clearing, dusk was already leaning hard into darkness. The trees were tall and tight-packed, their tops brushing against a dimming purple sky. A shallow river cut through the base of the ridge nearby, and the air had that clean, wild scent, like wet leaves and wood smoke, even though there wasn't a fire. I set up my tent on a flat patch of ground, opened a cheap beer, and sat by the river to let the static in my brain settle. It was perfect, until I saw it. At exactly 1:13 I checked. There was a faint glow on the ridge across from me. Not firelight, not a flashlight. It was pale blue, soft, unmoving, just sitting there like a candle behind frosted glass. I watched it for a while, trying to rationalize it. Maybe another camper? Or one of those old cabins tucked way up the mountainside. But it didn't flicker, didn't move. It was just there, and after about 20 minutes, it went out. Just blinked away. Weird, yeah, but I was tired. And the next day I chalked it up to exhaustion. But then it happened again. Second night, Sami time, same place, 1:13 a.m. A single, steady glow on the ridge. No sound, no movement. Third night, I set an alarm so I wouldn't miss it. This time, I stayed outside with my camera ready. When the glow appeared, I tried zooming in, but the trees blurred it out. I couldn't see any source, just that pale, eerie light hovering like it was waiting for something. And that's when I started to notice little things, like my camp chair wasn't folded the way I left it one morning. My food bag had been moved closer to the river, even though I was careful about keeping it tied up in a tree for bears. And on the 4th day, I found small impressions in the soft dirt just outside my tent. Footprints, human-sized, barefoot. I wish I could say I packed up and left, but something about the place had me hooked. You ever feel like you're part of something you don't understand, but it's pulling you in anyway? That's how it felt. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat outside with a flashlight and a knife I keep in my gear bag. When 1:13 hit, the light showed up like clockwork. Same spot, no sound, just watching. But this time, there was something else. The crickets had stopped, completely, and the air smelled wrong. It's hard to explain. Like old dirt, damp stone, the way basements smell after a flood. My eyes watered, and I felt this pressure in my chest like something heavy was sitting on it. The light didn't change, but I changed. My body knew something I didn't. I stayed like that until dawn, when the birds started chirping again, and the smell lifted like it had never been there. I didn't see the light the next night, or the one after that, and I should be relieved. But I wasn't, because by then, I realized something that made my stomach drop. The ridge where the light had been, there was no trail up to it. None. I checked every topographical map I could download. That part of the mountain was marked as inaccessible. Too steep. No known routes, but something was up there, watching, and I needed to know what. So on the 7th day, I made a plan. I packed light, just enough food and water for a few hours, and decided to hike up toward the ridge, trail, or no trail. I waited until morning and started climbing. The first hour was steep, but manageable. The trees thinned the higher I went, the air colder than it should have been for July. At one point, I found an old deer skull resting in a tree hollow. No rot, just bone, like it had been placed there. By noon, I reached a plateau. It wasn't flat enough to camp on, but it matched the location where the light had appeared every night. I stood there, panting, heart pounding, turning in slow circles. Nothing, just trees and stone, and its silence that made my ears ring. But then I saw it. Not the light, not yet. I saw a circle in the dirt, about 5 feet wide, cleared of leaves and debris, with a small pile of smooth rocks stacked perfectly in the center. No burn marks, no tools, just a deliberate circle, a place where something waited, and scattered around it were items that didn't belong. Shoe, a melted plastic watch, a torn piece of blue tarp, all half buried in the moss. That's when I realized something else, something that made me feel watched. The light hadn't disappeared, it had moved, and now it was behind me. I hadn't heard a sound, not a twig snap, not a breath of wind, but I felt it before I turned. That slow, primal pressure on the back of your neck, like your body knows it's being watched before your brain catches up. I turned around, and there it was, a pale blue-white glow, not 20 feet from where I stood, just beyond the tree line. No flame, no lantern, no source I could see, just the light, suspended in the air like a thought that hadn't decided whether to exist or not. It didn't move. Neither did I. I don't know how long we stood there like that. Me, barely breathing. The light, humming so softly I felt it more than I heard it, like a low electrical vibration in my chest, in my teeth. Then slowly, the light began to retreat. Not blink out. Retreat. Deeper into the trees. Always just far enough to keep me following. And I did, because I had to know. It pulled me through thickets and over rocks, deeper than any trail should have gone. The air felt heavier here. The woods were wrong. Quiet in that way that isn't peaceful. Quiet like the world had drawn a curtain, like something was happening behind it and didn't want to be heard. Eventually I reached a clearing, and I stopped, because what I saw there, it didn't make sense. There was a house, an old rotting cabin tucked into the hillside, almost entirely swallowed by the forest. Vines grew through broken windows. Shingles lay scattered like leaves. It looked centuries old. But the door was open, just a crack, and from inside that same light glowed, soft, inviting. My mind screamed no dog, but my legs, they didn't listen. The steps creaked under my weight, the kind of creak that echoes in your chest. I pushed the door gently. It opened with a dry moan, like it didn't want to be disturbed. Inside, the cabin was empty, but only at first glance. The floor was covered in dirt and ash, scraps of clothing, bits of plastic and metal, a rusted canteen, a cracked phone screen, all scattered like someone had been bringing things here, but never taking them back. And then I saw the walls. They were covered in names, hundreds of them, carved in shaky, deliberate hand. No dates, no explanations, just names. Some I couldn't read, half erased or grown over with moss. Others were fresh, like they'd been cut yesterday. And in the far corner, barely visible, was the last name added. It was mine. I didn't hear anything behind me. No footsteps, no breath, but I felt the presence. I turned slowly, the air thick with something I couldn't name, and standing in the doorway was a man, or at least I think it was a man. He was tall, thin, in a way that didn't look malnourished, just stretched, like his limbs had forgotten how long they were. His face was in shadow, but his eyes caught the light, and they didn't blink. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Just stood there like the forest had grown him from the floorboards. I tried to speak, to ask what is this, but the words died in my throat. Every instinct I had was telling me to run, but he never stopped me. He just watched. I backed out of that cabin like it might disappear if I blinked, and maybe it did, because when I finally turned and ran, crashing through trees, stumbling over rocks, that light didn't follow. When I made it back to my camp, it was already dusk. I packed what I could in silence, threw the rest in the river, and drove out of there before the sun fully set. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station 4 towns over. I must have looked half feral, dirt in my hair from the branches. But I didn't care. I just needed out. For weeks after, I didn't talk about it. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that cabin, that man, my name carved into the wall, and every night, at exactly 1:13 a.m., I'd wake up in a cold sweat, until one night I didn't. Instead, I heard a knock on my window. I live on the 2nd floor. When I worked up the courage to peek through the blinds, there was nothing there, just the faintest blue glow in the trees behind my apartment complex, fading slowly, passionately, like it was waiting. I don't know what I saw in those mountains. I don't know what that man was, or why my name was on that wall. But sometimes, when the world gets too quiet, I think about that light, and I wonder, what if I hadn't turned back? What if I stayed just a little longer? Would I have become part of whatever that place was? Or had I already? The trail that never ends. I've always been the kind of person who craves the wild. There's something about the crunch of leaves underfoot, the smell of pine in the air, and the way a trail stretches out ahead like a promise. So when I stumbled across a rumor online about an unmarked trail deep in West Virginia's Appalachian Mountains, I couldn't resist. They called it the Trail That Never Ends, a name that sounded more like a ghost story than a hiking path. Locals in a hiking forum warned it was hard to find and harder to leave, but that only fueled my curiosity. I packed my backpack, water, snacks, a compass, a map, and headed out at dawn, the October sky streaked with gold. Finding the trailhead was a challenge. It wasn't on any official map, just a vague set of directions. Past the old cemetery off Route 19, look for a gap in the trees. After an hour of driving winding back roads, I spotted it. A crumbling graveyard swallowed by vines, and behind it, a faint path snaking into the forest. I parked my car, slung my pack over my shoulder, and stepped onto the trail, my heart thrumming with excitement. This was it. A real adventure. Just me in the wilderness. The forest swallowed me quickly. Towering oaks and maples loomed overhead, their branches knitting together to form a canopy that dimmed the sunlight to a murky green. The path was narrow, overgrown with roots and moss, like it hadn't been walked in years. At first I loved it, the solitude, the rawness. But as I hiked deeper, a strange feeling settled over me. The woods were too quiet. No birds chirped, no wind rustled the leaves. It was as if the air itself was holding its breath, watching me. I shook it off. I'd hiked plenty of trails before. Silence wasn't unusual in dense forests. But after about 30 minutes, I noticed my compass acting up. The needle twitched and spun lazily, refusing to point north. I tapped it, frowned and tapped it again. Nothing. A flicker of unease sparked in my chest, but I told myself it was fine. The trail seemed straight enough. You just keep going and turn back if it got weird. That's when I saw the tree. It was impossible to miss. A gnarled, crooked oak, its trunk bent at a sharp angle like it had been snapped by a storm and left to heal wrong. It stood out against the uniformity of the forest, a natural landmark. I nodded to myself, memorizing it, and kept walking. The path stretched on, the trees pressing closer, their shadows stretching long and thin across the ground. 20 minutes later I stopped. There it was again, the crooked tree, right in front of me. My stomach flipped. I must have gotten turned around, I thought. Easy to do in a place this thick. I checked my useless compass, adjusted my direction, and started again, paying closer attention to my steps. 10 minutes later, my breath caught in my throat. The crooked tree loomed ahead once more, its twisted branches mocking me. This wasn't right. I'd walked straight. I was sure of it. My pulse quickened as I glanced back. The trail behind me looked different. The trees seemed tighter together, the path narrower, like the forest was shrinking around me. I pulled out my map, but it was no help. This trail wasn't charted. The sun was hidden behind the canopy, offering no sense of direction. For the first time, I felt a pang of real fear. Was I lost? That's when I spotted the journal. It was half buried near the crooked tree, its leather cover caked with dirt. I knelt and dug it out, brushing off the soil. The pages were brittle, the ink smudged but readable. It belonged to a hiker, someone like me, who'd come here years ago. The early entries were normal. Notes about the weather, the trail's beauty, the thrill of being alone. But as I turned the pages, the words grew frantic. Day 2. Passed the same tree again. Thought I was imagining it, but it's real. Something's off. Day 4. The trail keeps looping. I've tried every direction. It won't let me out. Day 6. Heard whispers last night. No one's here, but I'm not alone. If you find this, run. The last entry was a scroll. The handwriting shaky. It's watching me? A dark stain. Maybe mud, maybe something worse. Smeared the page. I dropped the journal, my hands trembling. This had to be a prank, right? Some twisted joke left to scare people. But the looping tree, the dead compass, it matched too perfectly. My mouth went dry as I scanned the forest. The shadows felt deeper now, the silence heavier, like the woods were closing in. I decided to turn back. Adventure or not, this place was wrong. But as I retraced my steps, the path seemed to stretch endlessly. The crooked tree appeared again, then again, each time closer, like it was following me. My chest tightened with panic. No matter where I went, I ended up in the same spot, the forest twisting around me like a maze with no exit. The light was fading fast, the sky turning a bruised purple through the trees. I needed shelter, somewhere to think, to wait out the night. That's when I saw the clearing. It opened up ahead, a small break in the forest, and in the center stood an old cabin. Its walls were weathered, its roof sagging, the windows dark and empty. It looked abandoned, forgotten by time. Relief washed over me until I got closer. In the mud outside the door was a single, fresh footprint. It was human-sized, but the toes were too long, too pointed, like something had clawed its way through the dirt. My heart pounded as I stared at it. The cabin felt wrong, like a trap waiting to spring. But the forest was darkening, and the air buzzed with something I couldn't name. I had two choices: step inside or face the trail at night. With a shaky breath, I pushed the door open and crossed the threshold. The cabin door creaked shut behind me, sealing out the last sliver of twilight. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of damp wood and something sharper, something metallic, like rust. My flashlight beam darted across the room, illuminating a scene frozen in neglect. A rickety table stood in the center, blanketed in dust, with a single chair toppled beside it. Cobwebs dangled from the ceiling like tattered curtains, and the floorboards groaned beneath my boots as I stepped forward. It looked abandoned, untouched for decades, yet something felt off. A chipped mug rested on the table, its handle smudged with what seemed like fresh fingerprints. My pulse quickened. Another hiker, maybe? Someone else trapped by the trail? But if so, where were they now? The thought coiled around my chest like a vice. I dropped my backpack and scoured the cabin for anything useful. A map, a radio, anything to escape this nightmare. The walls stared back, bare except for a few rusted nails. In the corner, a narrow staircase spiraled up to what might be an attic. The journal's words gnawed at me. It's watching me. But I had no choice. Answers were all I'd left. The stairs creaked under my weight, each step a sharp protest. The loft was cramped, its slanted ceiling brushing my head, a grimy window letting in faint moonlight. Shadows stretched across the floor, and there on a dusty shelf sat another leather-bound book. My hands shook as I opened it. The pages bore neat cursive, dated 1892, penned by a man named Elias, who'd built this cabin to escape the world. But his entries darkened quickly. October 12th. The forest has changed. The trails twist back on themselves. I've angered something ancient. October 15. It comes at night, a shadow with eyes like coals, watching from the trees. October 18. I cannot leave. The trail won't let me. I am bound to this place. Elias's words mirrored my own hell. The endless loop, the eyes in the dark. Was this cabin his cage too? I snapped the book shut. There had to be a way out, some crack in this curse. Then a rustling, like footsteps through leaves, drifted from outside. I crept to the window, peering into the inky forest. A shadow flickered between the trees. Gone before I could blink. My breath hitched. Was it Elias's watcher? I stumbled back, heart hammering. I couldn't stay still. If the trail wouldn't release me, maybe Elias had left a clue. I tore through the cabin, yanking open drawers and cabinets. Beneath the stairs I found a wooden box, its lid etched with spiraling symbols that seemed to writhe in the light. Inside, a folded parchment. A map. It showed the cabin and the forest, trails looping endlessly, with bound inked in red at the center. My stomach sank. The entire woods were a trap, but a faint line caught my eye, leading northeast from the cabin to an X. No label, just a mark. A fragile hope sparked. I memorized it. Past claw-shaped rocks, grabbed my flashlight and steeled myself. As I reached the door, a whisper slithered through the air. My name, soft and insistent. I froze, but staying wasn't an option. Outside, the forest hummed with life. Creaking branches, rustling leaves, that whisper weaving through it all. I pushed northeast, flashlight slicing the dark. After an eternity, I found the rocks, jagged like talons. At the X, there was nothing, just dirt and trees. Despair clawed at me. Another trick. Then I saw it. A rusted hatch, half buried, etched with those same symbols. My hands trembled as I cleared the leaves and pulled. It resisted, then screeched open, revealing stone steps plunging down. Stale air rose, thick with decay and a sickly sweetness. I wavered. Escape or trap, but the trail left me no choice. I descended, the darkness swallowing me. The steps were slick, roots snaking along the walls. The tunnel below was tight, oppressive. Whispers returned, louder, overlapping, chanting, "Stay!" I pressed on, emerging into a chamber. My flashlight caught an altar of bones. Animal, human, spiraled together. Atop it, another journal. Dread flooded me as I opened it. Names filled the pages, each entry ending, bound to the trail. My name was there, fresh ink glistening. The final line read, "It's here." A cold breath grazed my neck. The whispers stopped. Slowly I turned. I was the only park ranger on duty. Some jobs are quiet, others are lonely. Being a winter ranger in the Appalachians is both. But that night was something else entirely. I still don't know what really came to my door. I was stationed alone that season. Winter relief duty at Deep Rock Outpost, smack in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains. Technically, it's part of a lesser-used section of the trail. Off-season, it's dead quiet. No hikers, no tourists, just the wind, carving through trees, and the occasional crack of ice splitting in the woods. Most nights, I sat near the radio and read old ranger logs. Sometimes I'd get lost in the stories. Bear encounters, lost campers, ghost tales scribbled in margins like they were jokes. The older logs smelled like mildew and pipe smoke. I liked the silence. I'd even say I needed it. The outpost was a 2-room wooden cabin with a shortwave radio, a potbelly stove, and a porch overlooking the frozen trailhead. No phone service. Power ran off a gas generator. Water from a tank that froze solid half the time. If you wanted a mental reset from society, this was it. But something happened on my 4th night. It was just after 1 a.m. I was half asleep in the cot with a blanket wrapped up to my nose, the stove humming low and steady, when I heard it. 3 hard knocks on the front door. Not rustling, not a branch tapping. Knuckles. Human knuckles. I sat up, frozen. My first thought was maybe a stranded hiker, or a hunter who'd gotten turned around, but I hadn't seen tracks on the snow all day. It had been dumping since late afternoon. Anyone out there would have left prints. The second knock came. Slower, heavier. I grabbed my flashlight and made my way to the door. The porch light wasn't on. Bulb had blown 2 days ago, and I hadn't changed it. So when I cracked the door open, I could only see a shape. A man, mid-30s, maybe 40s, drenched in snow, breathing hard. His face was pale, lips cracked, like he'd been outside for hours. "I need to come in," he said. His voice was calm, too calm, almost rehearsed. But there was something off. Not how he looked, how he stood, like he was waiting to be told no. I stepped aside. "Yeah, come in. Get by the stove." He stepped in without a word. No thank you, no explanation. Just shuffled to the stove and held his hands over it. I closed the door and locked it, feeling the cold off his coat still in the air. "You all right?" I asked. He nodded slowly, eyes never leaving the fire. "Name's Drew. I'm the ranger posted here." No answer. "Where you coming from?" He didn't speak, just stared at the flames like they were saying something I couldn't hear. "You hurt? Lost?" Finally he whispered. "It followed me." I blinked. "What did?" He didn't answer. His breathing slowed. Then he said something that still sends a ripple down my spine when I remember it. "Don't let it in." That was it. Just that. I waited for more, but he didn't speak again. I offered him food, water. He didn't want any. I tossed a blanket at him and told him to lie down on the cot. I figured shock, maybe mild hypothermia. I'd seen worse. I decided I'd radio HQ in the morning and see about evac. Maybe even a wellness hold. I fell asleep in the chair near the stove. When I woke up, he was gone, not a single sign of him. No footprints on the porch, no melted snow. The cot was untouched, blanket folded, like he'd never been there. My first instinct was that I dreamed it. Long shifts can mess with your head, but when I looked at the stove, there were wet boot prints drying slowly in front of it. Not mine. I radioed HQ. Static. Not unusual. The storms up there could kill signal for hours. I spent the rest of the day checking the nearby woods. No tracks. No signs. No camps. Just trees, wind, and snow. The place swallowed him whole. That night I sat up with the lights on and my old revolver within reach. I kept telling myself it was just a weird encounter. Maybe he left early. Maybe he had a mental break. I almost believed it. Until the second night. Around 3:12 a.m., there were knocks again. 3 of them. Same pace. Same weight. Like someone using their whole fist. But this time, I didn't open the door. I turned off the light and crouched by the window. There was no movement outside. Just still snow. Faintly lit by the moon. I pressed my ear against the door. Nothing. Then something tapped the window behind me. I whipped around. Nothing was there, but I swear on my life, there was the faintest breath against the glass, like someone had exhaled just before I turned. I didn't sleep that night, just waited, flashlight on my lap, listening. The next morning, I checked the entire perimeter. No prints, no signs, but when I opened the journal I'd been writing in since arrival, there was a new page. Just one sentence, scrawled in shaky handwriting I didn't recognize. It didn't leave. I stared at that sentence in my logbook for what felt like hours. It didn't leave. The handwriting was rough. The kind of scratchy penmanship someone has when their hands won't stop shaking. It wasn't mine. I checked previous pages. Deliberate. Blocky. This line. Different pressure. Different slant. Someone had written it while I was sleeping. Or while I wasn't watching. There was only one key to the cabin, and it had been on my belt all night. I didn't leave the outpost that day. Couldn't. Oh, I felt watched. Not just the kind of paranoia in the woods feeling you get when you've been alone too long. This was different. It was physical, like something heavy pressing on your chest while you're wide awake. I triple-checked the locks, kept my revolver on the table, sat by the stove with the curtains drawn. The air felt colder inside than out. By nightfall, I was exhausted but wired. I didn't want to sleep. Every creak of the cabin floor, every gust of wind against the walls made my heart race. I thought about that man, his voice, how calm it was. Don't let it in. He didn't say who. He didn't say what. He just said it, and then he vanished. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the knocks came again. 3. Heavy, measured. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. This time, they were followed by something worse. A slow drag, like something sliding its fingers down the length of the door. It ended at the handle, then silence. Then, a click. The knob turned. It only jiggled once, gently, like whoever or whatever was outside already knew it was locked, and didn't mind. That's when I remembered something that hadn't registered the first time. The man from before never knocked like that. He used his knuckles, quick and urgent. This was different, slower, intentional, testing. I stayed frozen in my chair, gun in hand, eyes locked on the door. No more sounds. No footsteps walking away. No wind. Just stillness. Then something new happened. The radio behind me turned on. Full static. It had been dead for 2 days. Storm interference. But now it hissed like it had found a frequency. Beneath the static, something else moved. A whisper, low, garbled. I turned the knob slowly to try to make it out. The static cleared for half a second, just long enough to hear, "Let me in." Then, silence. I ripped the plug from the wall. Didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I made a decision. I packed my bag, If I had to hike to the next ranger station 12 miles out, I would. Anything was better than staying another night here. But when I opened the front door, I stopped cold. There were no footprints in the snow, no marks, but on the railing of the porch, etched deep into the wood, were 5 long gouges, like claw marks or fingernails. Fresh. No frost settled in them yet. That's when I saw something that made me stumble back. Hanging from the porch beam, right above where the man had stood that first night, was his ranger badge, just like mine. I climbed up and took it down. Same design, same state issue, same year. But the name engraved on it wasn't mine. It was Samuel Davis. I remembered that name. He was the ranger who disappeared up here in 2009. They found his cabin empty. His log stopped mid-sentence, like he'd stood up in the middle of writing and never came back. He was never found. I hadn't connected the dots before. Deep Rock Outpost, Winter Station. Zolo assignment. The official report said the post had been decommissioned for safety. But I guess someone changed their mind, or wanted me here for another reason. That night I stayed up with the lights on again. But this time, I didn't sit in the main room. I locked myself in the back with my sleeping bag and a hatchet, heart pounding. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again. Not at the door, not at the windows. Inside, soft, uneven footsteps, one after another. Slow, dragging. I held my breath, pressed my ear to the floor. It was in the room beneath mine, the crawl space. Then, scratching, right under where I sat. I tried to convince myself it was an animal, until I heard it speak. Open the door, Drew. It used my name, my voice, perfectly, like someone playing a recording of me, but I had never said those words, not out loud. The next morning, I tore the hatch open, went down into the crawl space with a flashlight. There was nothing there, just dirt, rock, cold air, until I noticed the carvings. Hundreds of names scratched into the foundation beams. Dozens of them crossed out, but one name, just one, was still clear. Mine, Drew Hayes, underlined, fresh. I scrambled out and ran. Didn't pack, didn't lock up, just ran. They found me 2 days later, walking barefoot on the trail, delirious and frostbitten. I told them everything. They called it trauma-induced psychosis, isolation, stress. Said I'd probably hallucinated most of it. They didn't even investigate the cabin. Didn't care. But a month later, when I was back home, I got a manila envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, old, black and white. It showed the porch of the outpost. 3 men standing in ranger uniforms. One of them looked exactly like me. Same build, same face, same crooked front tooth. On the back, written in pencil, Deep Rock Outpost, Winter 57, and in the top corner, scribbled hastily, it never leaves. It only waits.